We sang, what a God, because we believe He is powerful. And because He is powerful, because He is such a great God, that means He can help us in the seasons when life gets stressful and hard. When we're tempted to lose it, which is what we're talking about in this series, we've said there are a lot of reasons that we tend to lose it. Last week we talked about exhaustion and how that leads to physical stress and emotional stress and spiritual stress. We looked at the prophet Elijah and kind of his pattern and what got him to that place. Today, I want to talk about the subject of mismanaged emotions, because mismanaged emotions often lead us to meltdown, to losing it. But I want to back up a little before that. What's kind of the runway to mismanaged emotions? What gets us to that point? We all agreed last week, we've all lost it. We've all seen other people losing it. We enjoy it more when other people lose it than when we lose it, but we all lose it. And often we can see it coming. Maybe not so much in ourselves. We're not real good at seeing it coming in ourselves. But we can look at somebody else, and sometimes we think, like, they're going to lose it. Like, if something doesn't change, if they don't begin to manage life, responsibilities differently, meltdown is coming. And often what leads up to meltdown, what leads up to losing it, is not just one thing. It's a layering of situations in our life. We've all agreed before that if life would just give us one problem at a time, we could probably manage that. If all the pressures of life would take a number, if they wouldn't gang up on us, if they'd get in line, let me solve this one first, then I'll solve that one. But we've all lived long enough to know this is not how life works. Life sends everything at us at once, it seems. And so how do we prepare? How do we respond when all of the emotions begin to come at us at one time? We're going to look at a character by the name of Moses. This is the Charlton Heston, Let My People Go, Moses, that guy. We're not going to be talking about that particular part of his life, but that's the character we're going to study. And the meltdown that Moses has, I want to kind of walk us into, because I think there are reasons that he gets there, and I'm not making excuses for it. I think you can have reasons but not excuses. Not making an excuse. At the end of the day, Moses was responsible for how Moses responded. At the end of the day, you and I are responsible for how we respond. But sometimes when we step back, we go, oh, well, there were reasons that got me here. Like, there were steps that got me here, totally responsible for what happened at the end. But when I look back honestly, I see the progression that got me here. Numbers chapter 20, Moses makes a huge mistake, maybe his biggest mistake. And again, not making excuses. He was responsible. The Bible is very clear. He was disobedient in this moment. There were consequences for this moment. But I think if we look at some of the reasons, maybe we'll see some of those same things in our life and how we handle the big moments. The reason, big picture, the reason Moses got to the point of losing it is this: Moses experienced layers of challenging emotions. Layers, one right after the other. Layers of challenging emotions. When geologists study the earth strata, they're looking at layers of sediment and rock and minerals. And often, by studying the layers, the strata of the earth, they can determine when this particular formation was formed, when it came to be, how it came to be. Because they dig down through the layers and they realize, okay, this was on top of this, and this happened first because it's at the bottom, and then this happened. It's kind of what I'm suggesting today. We're going to kind of explore the strata of Moses' life and what led up to this really bad moment, this really bad moment of disobedience. Numbers chapter 20. It's the fourth book of the Bible, so it's close to the beginning. If you have your copy and you want to read along, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Numbers chapter 20, we're going to be there in just a moment. Here's one of the layers for Moses. Moses experienced repeated frustration. Repeated frustration. We all get frustrated. It's part of life. We get frustrated at work. We get frustrated with our family. We get frustrated with our friends. We get frustrated with the world. Like, we have all of these layers of frustration. But when there is persistent, repeated frustrations that make you say things like, haven't we already talked about this? Like, has anybody ever said that? Haven't we already talked about this? Weren't we here before? Didn't we just solve this problem and now it's back again? That sort of, I thought we addressed it, I thought we fixed it, and now we have to face it again. I thought the last 40 times we talked about this would take care of it, and now we're at 41, right? That feeling of it just keeps coming back. That repeated frustration. For Moses, one of the dominant repeated frustrations of Moses' leadership of God's people was their complaining. Just from the moment they leave Egypt, which Moses leads them out of slavery in Egypt, and almost from the moment he leads them out of Egypt, there is this consistent, chronic complaining. And if you're a leader, if you lead one person, two people, 5,000 people, if you're a leader in any capacity, you know how this chronic complaining just begins to wear you down. And part of the reason is because complainers don't ever think they're complaining, do they? They think they're helping. They think they're no, they're complaining over. And as a leader, you know what it's like just to hear that again and again. And again, maybe you've heard it at work, like maybe you've heard it in other churches. We don't experience a lot of that. I'm not being facetious. Like, we don't experience a lot of that in our church, but there are churches. It's just always something, always a complaint. As soon as they leave Egypt, whenever they lacked something, you've read the story, whenever they lacked something, it was always, oh, why can't we go back to Egypt? Things were so much better. Another problem with the complainers, they have really bad memories. Right? Really bad memories about how good the past was. Oh, if we could just go back to Egypt, we had food and it was so great. It was like a vacation. No, you were slaves in Egypt. It was bad in Egypt. It wasn't good. This is how complainers are. At my previous job, we did it. My previous boss did it this way. We had these benefits. We had this flex time. Problem solved. Go back to your previous job. Right? If you're a boss, you're a leader, you're tempted to say that. Maybe you have said that. Like, yeah, why don't you just go back to when it was so good for you because you're making us miserable here. Just go back to this wonderful memory that you have. This is Moses all the time. Moses, it's terrible now. It was so much better for 40 years. I mean, imagine hearing this for 40 years. Some of you don't have to imagine. You got family, right, that for 40 years or more, it's the same complaint every time you get together. You're emotionally trying to get ready for Thanksgiving, right? Already, right now, because you got to sit at the same table with people who complain all of the time. Listen, you just know they're going to grumble. And for Moses, it wasn't just general repeated complaining. It was very specific things that they kept complaining about. And God would solve them, and they would complain about them. The next thing, the situation we're going to look at is specifically about not having enough water. Now, there's kind of parallel stories. One is in Exodus 17. This is when it happens before. And then the one we're going to study, Numbers 20. We're going to bounce back and forth. We'll put the scriptures on the screen so you don't have to keep flipping back. But this happens before, example of this sort of repeated complaining that Moses is dealing with. This is Exodus 17, verses 1 through 3. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" So this whole situation happens previously. God responds. God provides water. Numbers chapter 20, years later, beginning in verse 2, now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines or pomegranates, and there is no water to drink." Just on repeat. Same thing. There was no water. God provided water. God can do that again, but we're going to complain to you, and not just the complaining. And if you're a leader, maybe you'll feel this. Moses also felt the pressure of being the leader. Right? Moses feels the pressure of, it's my job to solve it. If you're not the leader, there's nothing wrong with not being the leader. If you're not the leader where you work or in your organization, when somebody complains, you have the luxury of saying, "Not my problem." That's great. That's a wonderful place to sit. That's a great, get that chair if you can get it. Not my problem, nothing I can do about it. Now, you don't ever tell the complainer that, let's be honest. When the complainer's complaining, I know what you do. You go, yeah, and then you go to your office and you shut the door and you go, "Not my problem. Glad I don't have to deal with that." Moses is the leader. Moses doesn't have the option of saying, "Not my problem, hope they figure it out." Moses feels this pressure. Again, if you lead in any capacity, you know when somebody brings you a problem, you feel the sense of, I'm supposed to fix this. Or at a minimum, I have to decide if this should be fixed or not. You can't fix every problem that people complain about, right? So even that mental exhaustion of, do I respond? Do I not respond? Do I try to fix it? Do I not try to fix it? And then dealing with the disappointment if you can't fix it, if you don't feel like leaders, you get that. There is that weight. I once read a quote that it said something like, leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can tolerate. Right? That's leadership. It's like, okay, I cannot do everything that you want. I cannot respond to every complaint. How can I disappoint you at a rate that will keep you on the team? Moses is feeling all of that. I'm just trying to get us in Moses' shoes before we see how he responded. Moses is feeling that weight. Back to Exodus 17. Here's Moses' response. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." Like, they expect me to do something. He's feeling that weight. Nobody else is feeling that weight but Moses, frustrated by the constant complaining, pressured by the sense, I'm the leader, I got to solve it, I got to fix this. Now, here's another part of being the leader, Moses being the leader. Moses is in the same situation as everyone else. Sometimes we forget that about leaders. He didn't have water either. He didn't have like a secret stash of water. Leadership, in any capacity, like what everybody else is feeling, you're feeling it too. Like you wish there were water. You wish this problem was solved. You wish you weren't going through this issue. Sometimes we think of, well, the leader's just immune from all of that. They're just supposed to fix all of our problems. No, Moses doesn't have water either. He's experiencing all of the same consequences as the people who are there. This is kind of the difference between being a leader in the organization and being a consultant to the organization. By the way, consultants are very, very important. We have some people in our church who are consultants. So consultants, they serve a very good purpose. the purpose, the benefit of a consultant is they come in with fresh eyes and no biases and no history, and they're not overlooking problems. They're giving you objective feedback. Hey, this is what is happening in your organization that you need to respond to. But we all know, and this is not critical, we all know that at the end of the consultation, they get a check and go home. And then the leader, he or she, has to decide what to implement, and the leader experiences the consequences of what they implemented and didn't implement based on the consultant's recommendation. Moses is in the group. He's not the consultant to the group. Like, he's not going back to his house. Whatever he decides, however he responds, he is going to feel the weight of the consequences of that. Again, I'm just trying to put us in Moses' shoes. Not only that, Numbers 20, we skipped the first verse. Verse 1, in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. Pause right there. Some of you know the story, some of you don't. I got to summarize it quickly. If you don't know the story, that's fine. We'll come back and help you understand it later. Moses leads the people out of Egypt. They go to Mount Sinai. They receive the law. God gives them instructions. Kind of, this is who you're going to be. These are the people you're going to be. 2 years after leaving Egypt, they arrive at Kadesh looking into the promised land that God wanted to give them. They send in 12 spies. Caleb and Joshua are the only two that come back and say, look, God said he was giving us the land. Let's go take it. The other 10 come back and say, no, they're too big and they're too strong. We'll never be able to take it. And the Bible says they stir up all the people to complain. This is another problem with the culture of complaining. It's just really easy to get people to complain about anything. Like when there's kind of a culture of complaining, it doesn't take much. And so they come back and they get everybody to argue with Moses that, no, we shouldn't do this. Because of that disobedience, they didn't trust God. They didn't trust God, and so God says, fine, you're going to wander in the desert, and this whole generation is going to die off. When we get to Numbers chapter 20, 38 years have passed, and they are back in that same place, Kadesh. They're in that very same place, looking over at the very same promised land. And you think there's not flashbacks in Moses' mind? You think he's not feeling the weight of woulda, coulda, shoulda, man, 38 years ago, we were right here. What if we had, if only we had trusted? I mean, in this moment, Moses is revisiting a painful place from his past. He's there in this moment that they failed. And as a leader, you take responsibility for some of that, right? You're asking yourself, how could I have led better? How different would everything be if things were different? All of this is happening in Moses. In the second part of verse 1, there Miriam died and was buried. Like just one short phrase. If you don't know who Miriam is Moses' sister. So here we're coming into this emotionally weighty moment. Moses is worn down by frustration, repeated grumbling about the same thing. How am I going to fix it? He's grieving the mistakes of 38 years ago, and he lost his sister. And if you read the story, it was a complicated relationship at times, but whose family isn't, right? Whose family isn't complicated? Most of Moses' life, she had been supportive and encouraging, but it was a complicated relationship, and he's grieving the loss of her. And we all know, if you've lost somebody, we know how grief colors our perspective, colors our emotions, weighs on us. Moses is dealing with a lot. Yeah, not making excuses. I'm just giving you reasons to understand the emotional state of Moses in this critical moment. When he makes a big mistake, things had gotten layered in his life. So let's pause there. Let's think about our own lives. And here's what I want to challenge you with. We need to allow God's Spirit to help us see when the emotional strata of our life is building up. We need to be in prayer. We need to be sensitive to God's Spirit so we can hear the voice that says, need to be really careful in your decision making right now. Need to be really careful with the words that you choose. Because these things have been piling up in your life. And maybe they're your fault, maybe they're not your fault. Not excuses, reasons. You're weary, you're weighed down, emotionally things are piling up, and if you don't rely on the gracious, restraining power of the Holy Spirit, you're going to do something and say something that you regret. You're going to lose it. Numbers 20, verse 6. Here's how they responded. Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Just quick time out. Isn't it wonderful that when we come to God, when we are emotionally depleted, God shows up? He appeared to them. They went in, God, we need you. And God was there. And I can tell you, maybe you don't always feel it. Maybe you don't always know it. When we come to God in these moments, He shows up. He is there. The Lord said to Moses, take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community, so they and their livestock can drink. God was ready to provide for His people, grumblers even though they were. God's ready to provide. God's ready to display His glory. I'm going to meet the need. They're going to know it's from me. Their eyes are going to be turned towards me. God's going to get glory as He provides for His people. Now, back in Exodus chapter 17, God commanded for Moses to take his staff and hit the rock. That's Exodus 17. In Numbers, God tells Moses, I want you to speak to the rock. Have you walked with God long enough that God doesn't always do it the same way every time? God doesn't always accomplish His purposes in the same way every time. Like sometimes we get in a rut and we think, well, we did it this way 20 years ago. And God's like, that was 20 years ago. I want you to do it this way. I want you to obey me in this new direction, in this new way. God doesn't always duplicate. He's not always copy and paste in His instructions. Another reason why we need to be in His Word. We need to be talking to Him in prayer so we know how God's going to lead us. So Exodus chapter 17, God says, I want you to go out, I want you to hit this rock. And we're told, so Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. That's all we're told. Go hit the rock. Moses did it. God commanded. Moses obeyed. Numbers 20, verse 9. So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he commanded. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. And Moses said to them, the people, listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Exodus 17, we're told God said it. Moses did it. That was it. God speaks, Moses obeys. Numbers 20. Moses decides to do some improv. It's like, it's a good plan, God. I'm going to add a little spice to this plan. Like, I got my own thoughts on how this should go down. It goes off script. And I can see it. Like, I feel this. Moses walking out of the tent, mumbling to himself. I'm going to give him some water. I'm going to give a piece of my mind first. They got it coming. I mean, they can't get away with this. Like, I can't just walk out there and they get water. I got to let them know that they are wrong and I'm right. I got something to say before I get to this whole water thing. And you've been there. You've been there. I mean, be honest, there's a little part of you and there's a little part of me that goes, get him, Moses. That's my man. That's the dog right there. Him, like, yeah, I get it. I would, yeah, say it. that somebody needs to tell them. They can't just get away with this. Listen, you rebels and all of the frustration, all of these layers of emotion and fatigue and drain pours out in anger from Moses. Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water? Moses kind of elevating himself in this moment, isn't he? Like me and God, we are going to perform something for you. And Moses has lost the plot at this point, right? Now this is about God providing for his people and God getting glory for what God is about to do. And Moses starts with, listen, you rebels. It doesn't say, God said, speak to the rock, and Moses did it. Moses inserts himself into the narrative here. Verse 11, then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. God never says strike the rock. God said, I want you to speak to the rock. Moses speaks to the people, not to the rock. Relies on what he had done before in order to get water. And God still performs the miracle. God is still going to provide for his people. Right? God is still going to move. God is still going to get his work done. But Moses has disobeyed. Moses has disobeyed. And I get it. If you know where this story is about to go, you do not like this part. You don't like this part. I don't like this part. We're going to argue until we die that this is not fair. We're going to argue crime doesn't fit the punishment. Come on, God. You'll argue all you want. There were consequences to Moses' disobedience. There just were. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites. In other words, this doesn't have anything to do about the rock. This doesn't have anything to do about water, hitting the rocks. This has to do with the fact that you didn't honor me, God speaking, and what I told you to do. Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them. Moses and Aaron don't set foot in the promised land. Look, I get it. We can argue about what is fair. God is a just God at the end of the day. Doesn't matter what you and I think about fair. We can argue about crime and punishment. Does it fit God? This seems to be too much. Here's what we know. There are consequences when we disobey God and lose it. Even with all the reasons. Even with all the reasons. And the reasons are important because they help us notice when something's happening inside of us. But you stack up all the reasons, and if there's still disobedience, Moses teaches us there are consequences. There are consequences. Notice that God doesn't mention the people when he talks to Moses. God doesn't say, I know it's been tough. Yes, they are all complainers. God talks to Moses and Aaron. This is not talking about what they did. I want to talk about how you responded. And that's when we want to go, but, did you see what they said? But, did you see what they posted? Like, I had to give a listen rebels to that. That's what I had to do. No. I'm not talking about what they did. I'm talking about how you responded. What you said. The emotion that came out of you. And God does that with us. And listen, we live at a time in a world of listen rebels. We all want to tell somebody off. We all want to set somebody straight. We all want to be angry. And God would say to you what I believe he said to Moses. We're not discussing what they said. We're not discussing what you think they did or what you think they deserve. We're going to discuss what you said and how you responded and what came out of your mouth. We're going to talk about you. Moses, in so much of our biblical imagery, Moses represents the law. He's the lawgiver. And under the law, under Moses, the law said an eye for an eye. Give them what they got coming. But then later on, Jesus shows up and says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I tell you, when somebody strikes you on one cheek, turn the other. I tell you that what God is really interested in is not what they did, it's how you responded to what they did. Moses responds by taking this layer of emotion and exploding. Jesus comes. You want to talk about layers. He's betrayed by a person closest to him. He's rejected by his own. He came to his own, they received him not. His friends deserted him. He was tried and convicted and sentenced to death for crimes he did not commit. He endured the pain of the cross, hung on a cross for 6 hours, and what came out of him? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You're going to be Moses, you're going to be like Jesus. You're going to allow the frustration that may be very real and you may have strong feelings about. I understand. You're going to allow that to explode out of you, or you're going to allow the gracious Spirit of God to be the restraining force so that you can continue to live out the fruit of the Spirit. You're going to decide. We're all going to have frustrations. We're all going to have strata, layers of frustration. We're going to respond to what's happening in the world like Moses. We're going to respond like Jesus. And that's why we're going to come. During this closing song, and we're going to be reminded, Jesus said, this is my body, it's going to be broken. Not because it was right or fair, because he was willing to give his life away for those who were attacking him. He was willing to face the hardest, darkest moment and give himself away. And in doing so, if we walk with him, if he is in our life, he gives us the ability to do that. 2025, he gives us the ability to live out his grace and goodness and love. So I'm going to pray. The band's going to come play, and we invite you. We invite you to remember how Jesus gave his life away. God, we ask that you would make us like Jesus and not like Moses. We all in this life, we have layers of pain and frustration. There is wrong and there is hurt. In our humanness, we want to respond, listen, you rebels. And yet we look at our Savior, and his response was to give himself away, was to offer forgiveness, was to care for those who were on the cross beside him, at the cross in front of him. Out of him flowed Love and grace. In the moment, he was the most betrayed and most harmed. Love and grace continued to flow out of him. Thank you for Jesus. In his name we pray. Amen. Stand, and I invite you to the table.